as part of a high school course, and so I had this sense of justice around, the Watergate scandal, and journalism was the fourth estate, and it holds, the government accountable for what they do, and you get to journalism school, and it's not that at all. And at the time, the internet was a big thing, and people didn't know if there was going to be journalists left with the internet at the time, because blogs were a thing. So I took Women in America, was cross-listed as with American Studies and History, and it was like an awakening, like that was my moment, and it like really just, I was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, this is where I'm supposed to be, these are my people, and I never looked back. Yeah, so that was sort of my evolution.
So I'm from Houston, and I guess I grew up with strict parents, and so they didn't let me and my sisters go to sleepovers and can't go out without us, and a lot of it because we were girls, because we had other cousins that were boys who they could go out and do what they wanted and stuff. But I guess that's what kind of made me a little bit angry and stuff. And when I got to high school, a lot of boys that we were friends with, we were like into like the rocker scene, but there was not that much talk about like female rockers, and the boys were kind of like bullies, but you're friends at the same time. And so that's when like I started looking up like Janis Joplin and Hart and things like that, where I was kind of like, oh, I want to listen to like women, like musicians. And I think I found out about Bikini Kill on like MySpace or something. And I was like, that's when I first found out like the word feminism, I think. And then once I kind of went to college is when it kind of expanded, like it's like about intersectionality and stuff like that. And so yeah, that's how I kind of got there.
I was born in Austin, Texas. My mom and dad met at UT in 1970. My mom's white, my dad's Mexican-American, so they were pretty unusual as a couple at that time. And they had trouble with their families in terms of accepting their relationship. So they stayed here after they graduated and raised me and my sister. So my mom's a big hippie. My parents are both hippies, and so it was kind of natural for me. When I turned 13, my older sister gave me my first copy of Our Bodies, Ourselves, and I was just so cool. When I was in high school, I did newspaper, and of course I went to school here in Texas where the education about sex was all about abstinence only, and that really upset me, and so I wrote like a front page editorial like study for the newspaper in high school, so that was kind of like my big break into feminist activism, which was pretty cool. And then, what was the rest of the question? Where did I come from? How did I get interested?
Yeah, you're doing great.
Okay, I'm forgetting something. So I guess coming to UT and studying women's and gender studies just totally made sense to me. I had a lot of influence. My older sister also did CWGS in journalism when she was at Texas State, so family legacy, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. Times have really changed, because my next question was going to be, how did you find the major? Some of you answered that already. But how did you find the major, and how did people in your life respond to you wanting to take this study on, take on this training? And I know for me, with certainly with my family, but even my peer group, this was the late 80s, early 90s, I think there was a lot of like, what's that? And why would you do that? And where does this lead you? And then, other responses equally unsupportive, but sort of unsurprised of like, yeah, of course you would do that sort of thing, which, didn't necessarily feel good. So it wasn't like, anybody was like, yay. So that was kind of challenging. So I was curious, sort of what your stories were once you decided to take on the major or the minor. I think each of you has maybe a little bit different relationship to the field.
I was, so when I first started at UT as an undergrad, it wasn't available, and like Brandon said, those were the coolest classes. So when it did come, it was like, oh, I can get a major in this. I have that many classes that allowed me to put this on a degree. But I had the same sort of thing. I mean, my mom was like, cool, knew it. But, you know, I think I had this role in like my friend group of like, oh, of course Asha's doing that, and like, of course Asha's gonna go to like a lunchtime like talk on faddism, and like, oh God, Asha again. But it was like the best. I really appreciated UT, even though I'm sort of critical of this, like, oh, what is opportunity, right? But I did feel like I was able to explore and find things at UT Austin, like being at the gender and sexuality and being able to take on student leadership roles that my friends and other people weren't doing, and they weren't having these conversations that were thought-provoking and interesting and also very confusing, because you go about in the world thinking that it's a certain way, and then you have intuition too that you're told, don't listen to it, right? So you're like sort of, you've been oppressing yourself, other people have been oppressing you, and you finally get an opportunity to think and see things in a different way. So I guess people are actually still like that with me though, but they're like, oh, that feminist Asha, which is okay though. Because I'm awesome.
Great, thank you.
So yeah, so when I also got to UT, it wasn't a major yet, but there were sort of classes that were cross-listed with Latin American Studies, and I had originally declared a Latin American Studies major. So neither one of my parents went to college. They were just happy I was here, and I think for them it didn't matter what I majored in as long as I got a degree. And you know, at the time I thought I'm going to go to law school and be a lawyer, and that did happen, but it happened and then it didn't happen. Like I decided not to do law at all after getting my law degree. But and so I don't think they were as worried about it. But I also think that once I came home and would visit during holiday seasons and carry all of this knowledge that I learned with me and kind of share it with them, especially my mom, I think that the value of the program sort of spoke for itself. You know, once I could give stats to how gender violence works, once I could give stats to pay inequality, once I could talk about in a much more sophisticated way the way sexism works, once I could, you know, breathe life into thinking about family relationships and emotional dynamics between people in a way that made analytical sense, you know, I think I came off across my parents' nerd, but they're open-minded people, and even though they didn't go to college, and so being able to share with them the kind of knowledge I was learning and the way I was thinking about society, and being able to share it with them in a compelling way, I think that's, for me, I never got the kind of resistance of, oh, you're not learning anything. I think they're like, you're learning too much, shut up, let's just watch this movie. And so for me, I never felt like I hit a wall with my folks anyway about what I was learning in college.
There was lots of confusion, like what are you doing? What even is that? And for my family, the best way I could describe it is it's a specialized sociology degree. A lot of the women in my family were educators, so they understood what sociology, excuse me. So they understood what sociology was as a study, so kind of framed it like that. I didn't tell my family for a long time. I told them I was doing art history because they already knew I was weird anyway, so like kind of fit in. I think it was like a year before I was going to graduate, I told my mom, I was like, so I changed my major some time ago. This is actually what I've been doing. And she was like, okay, whatever. Like, you know, for me, you know, I had done the work to get scholarships. Thankfully, those were available to me. And so she was like, if this is your work, this is what you're doing. Like, if this is what you want to do, then do it. And so my mom was really great in that she didn't always understand what I was doing, but if it felt right to me and if it was what I wanted to do, then she was comfortable with it and she was going to support me in the best way that she knew how. And so I don't think she would, I think now maybe I could get her to say she was a feminist. But for a long time, I don't think she, for her, she ever identified as it. But I do think I had a feminist-like upbringing in her household. So now I'm still that, the outspoken political feminist. I mean, my family knows who I am. I don't, make any excuses for what I do or what I say, and, they either accept me or they don't. And I thankfully have also sort of formed an activist family, outside of my blood relatives, and so I feel rich in that, and that I get the support from my activist family that I can't always find from my blood relatives, and that's okay with me. So I've found peace with that, and we support each other.
Yeah, for me, I think maybe having journalism helped so that my parents didn't have to think about the WGS thing too much. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna be like the reporter. But they wanted me to like come on like broadcast news, and they wanted me to be like an anchor and stuff like that. So they kind of had their own illusions while I was in school. And so I was kind of free to like do my thing. But yeah, I think I kind of did clash a little bit with my family. Like my cousins and me grew a little bit distant because like I kind of started becoming like very vocal, and they would like kind of like get annoyed with me, like, oh, you're always saying this is bad or that's bad and stuff like that. So I kind of had to like navigate. I'm not like that like strong with them anymore, like about what I'm learning, but it's okay. I kind of like will say things every now and then. Like one tactic I learned is like if somebody in your family says something weird, just go like just like at least say that you're like it's not kind of okay, and then like maybe open up a conversation. But yeah, I feel like it's still something my family doesn't really understand too much. But I feel like now with like actually with like Trump like winning the election, like a lot of my family kind of understands things like more in a way, because I'll be like, oh, that's kind of like what I was telling you before. Like that's like
talking about this for a while.
Yeah, like that's really mean to those group of people. Like women are treated bad and stuff like that. But they're just really like also very influenced by like the American dream type thing. Mm-hmm. So my dad still tells me like, when are you gonna become a teacher, and like, cause now I do a film, so that's kind of like another challenge too. So yeah, they still want like that security for their children. They don't want like the general like feminist studies thing that kind of like hurts them to hear it. Like they'll worry like, oh, like what's gonna happen to you when we're gone? You're not gonna have any money, and so it's kind of like a compromise and stuff of like, giving them some security, but kind of sharing bits and pieces of myself, of that part of myself with them, because they're kind of just worried, or sometimes they're not at a certain knowing about feminism and stuff like that. So it's like a slow process.
For me, it wasn't much of a surprise to my family that I wanted to do women's and gender studies. They always supported me in all of that. And like among me, my mom and my sister, I'm probably the least loud. I'm like the quiet one, and they're the ones that are super I mean, not that I'm not politically active, but they're, on the front lines of everything and super informed. And when I go see my parents, my mom's like, let me tell you about this. So I get a lot of political lectures from my mom. I think for me, the tension has been more in terms of being a professional martial artist. That's been a little bit tough for my mom, especially, and my dad too. When I first started, my mom was like, it's so hard watching you get beat up, because they would come to my belt test and see me get thrown on the ground and have these big dudes throwing me around. And I had to assure them over and over, like, these people are great, they respect me, they love me, I'm safe doing what I'm doing. And I think that's gotten easier for them as time has gone on. By the time I tested for my black belt, my mom said, I'm not worried about you anymore, like I know you're gonna be okay. I think now that they're kind of accepting that, now the next push is, so when are you going to grad school? It's like, okay, you're doing this thing, but you know, same kind of feeling of, are you squandering your education and your what you're capable of by just doing karate? You know? But I think they're starting to see how I'm making it into a career and making a difference in my community. So, yeah.
So next I thought we could each talk a little bit about what we're doing now and how our training in women's and gender studies informs our work, or we use that work. And I'll just share briefly, so as Jackie mentioned in my introduction, I currently work as the Associate Vice President for Student Life at Columbia University, and which is not typically like maybe a typical trajectory for someone in women's and gender studies, but I definitely I feel like my feminist training as well as my counseling training are really sort of my backbone, what I lean against the most every day as I face whatever challenge or opportunity is presented to me. And you know, I was an undergraduate a really long time ago. We didn't have that word, intersectionality, but I was really fortunate that that my intro to feminism professor was a woman named Bettina Abdecker, who, if you don't know, I hope that you will go look her up. But she actually was the leader of the free speech movement at UC Berkeley back in the '60s, and was a confidant and remains a confidant of Angela Davis, and she worked on Angela Davis's defense team. She's a really remarkable person, and how she explained feminism in that course, what she said was that feminism was really about how we bring to the center those who have been on the edge. So I think that, you know, that it wasn't that word intersectionality, but it was that message. So it really set me up to do that work and to do that training and to do that thinking with an intersectional lens. So I knew that, you know, whether it was, you know, advocating for the elimination of the death penalty or advocating for farm workers, that all of that was truly feminist work. And so, and that's essentially what I do in my work now. I think about the students who come from historically marginalized communities and think about what their experiences are on the campus and how we can improve that experience and how we can set people up around them to support them better so that they can be successful. So it's not necessarily, you know, at the vanguard of feminist work, but it definitely, I infuse it every day into how I approach the work that I do.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about getting a master's at the LBJ school because it was, as someone who identified as an activist and as progressive and was ready to develop herself further into someone who was radical, I didn't necessarily get that. I think you must told me that when I was when I was thinking about it. But, you know, I went there and I was really, really excited to think about women's health and reproductive rights and justice and what that looks like in the policy sphere, and I didn't find my space there. So what I ended up doing was looking at healthcare in general, which is still absolutely a feminism issue, but it wasn't necessarily like that. I wasn't getting like the further push in my learning about what it is to be a feminist policymaker or a political player. So